Base in Newport can respond to climate change and global warming, sea level rise, all of those things. She just recently had an article published in the journal Nature on ways in which recreating marshes could have an impact, or how much work it would take for it to really have an impact, as I used to say. So we're blessed to have someone as distinguished and knowledgeable and passionate about this work as Emily Sneed. And so I'd like to turn this over to Emily with her presentation about our Aquidneck Parish Resilience Project, which I spoke with Vestry about a couple of months ago, and some great conversations have come out of that. There's the term synchronicity, or the work of the Holy Spirit, is going on in that the state of Rhode Island has approached Emmanuel as well as other churches about being centers for warming and other ways in which to support populations at risk at times of extreme weather.
As has the Newport Fire Department. We're working hard to coordinate all of these conversations.
Yes,
Emily's working hard to do that.
So I'll turn this over to Emily.
Thank you. Well, I thought I'd start with kind of like the overview before we get into some of the slides. And I was just reading a book to my sons last night, and children's books really say it best. So if you're not familiar with climate change, it's basically like a blanket. So these carbon dioxide and other gases are creating this blanket that's making the planet heat up. And that's, in essence, why we have these extreme weather events. And then, we went to a good children's book to just sum it up. Here's renewable energy, and here are the things you can do in your everyday life. Pass it around. And I also brought this book about how much water is used to make every kind of everyday product you have at home, or how your daily life depends on clean water. So I'm sure you probably are familiar with climate change. But we saw this summer, and we see around the globe, how we're having these warmer summers, wildfires, and it's all fueled by, these disasters are fueled by warmer oceans. And preparing for disasters has become a very urgent matter, because the more we can plan ahead of time and build more resilient infrastructure, or prepare existing buildings like this to withstand, strong winds, extreme rain, the more we can protect those that are most vulnerable. So the Diocese of Rhode Island was fortunate to receive one of 12 grants in the country from the National Episcopal Church. With this Creation Care grant, we are working with the 6 Episcopal churches on Aquidneck Island. So we actually have completed this presentation now 6 times, and we'll continue to work with all 6 throughout the year. And we're helping to make communities more resilient. And actually, as you see with this presentation, Newport really is the epicenter of marginalized communities that are disproportionately impacted by extreme weather events. As well as this kind of climate preparedness work we're doing, we also have planned through this grant 2 mini pilgrimages. So Norman has mentioned that Emmanuel has invited the one that will look at our coastlines with an expert from URI is on November 18th, going all around the island. And then we'll have another one in the spring looking at our watershed and our internal river systems that we depend on, honestly, for our drinking water and other uses. And then we'll be gathering all of the 6 churches together for a summit in May, with community members and some national experts. We've been working with Creation Justice Ministries, and they have recognized that some of the work we're doing hasn't been done before. There are good examples. I'll start here. I went over the grant from the Episcopal Church, but there are some good examples by Episcopal churches around the country. In California, St. Martin's was able to reduce its carbon footprint. St. Luke's in Annapolis was able to restore a wetland that absorbs water and also sequesters carbon, meaning it takes in the carbon from the atmosphere and buries it into the sediment. Also in North Carolina, they've done a lot of work partnering with North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light and other organizations to host sea level rise adaptation talks, which is similar to what we're doing. So I will start with this presentation with some of the climate change impacts we're seeing here in Rhode Island, as well as what is predicted to occur in the not so distant future. So Rhode Island has already warmed by 4 degrees Fahrenheit over the last century. From 1950 till about now, average rainfall has increased 16%, but what's really shocking is these extreme flash flood events, that has increased 116%.
Yeah.
Since 1930, our sea level rise has risen more than 9 inches. That's higher than the global average. So sea levels vary around the world, and 9 inches is actually more than it has if you take the median of the global rate. Where it's predicted that temperature, drought, precipitation, these extreme rain events will all increase. And sea level rise is predicted to increase another 1.5 to 2 feet in 40 years here in Rhode Island. As well as the water is warming. The southern New England coast is among the planet's fastest warming marine waters. So what does that mean for us? Well, you might have heard that a manatee, which normally lives in Florida, came to Rhode Island recently because it travels with the warmer water and it just uses these environmental cues. Unfortunately, a manatee wasn't able to survive here because this isn't long-term an ideal environment for it. You also see those changes play out: fires, flood events. The bottom center photo is the permafrost melting in Alaska. Permafrost has always been part of the built infrastructure in Alaska and the Arctic. So here's an example of when you don't have the permafrost, roads, telephone poles here, bridges are actually being impacted, and it's leaning over because of the melting permafrost. One kind of anecdotal story, we had many here this summer of beach closures because of poor water quality, but the New York City Triathlon, they had to cancel the swimming portion because the New York Harbor was not safe for swimming because of the extreme rain events. They run off sewage, fertilizer, all the kind of human impacts get into our waterways and cause blooms and things that make it unsafe for us to swim in. So for sea level rise predictions, this is a visual from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Right now, our flood days are about 3, in 2021, we're about 3 every year. What's really disturbing is that number by 2050 will increase to 45 to 75 days a year.
Oh no.
So this isn't from a storm, this isn't from even precipitation inland, it's high tide. Sometimes it will be like completely sunny out. I lived in Norfolk, Virginia, where you have these sunny days and you'd still have flooding. You know, a church had to relocate because the nuisance flooding as a result of sea level rise was becoming a daily, impacted daily living.
Emily, let me just interrupt you for a second. She knows this is my favorite statistic, in that it's something that we can experience even now. That sometimes the rain just seems to be more intense than it used to be, and it's documented that that's what's going on. And if in 2050 there's one of those events roughly every week, what does it mean in 10 or 15 years? Twice a month? I mean, just a couple of weeks ago there was a very rainy day, and all over the city there were all these places where the water had collected, and that was not a dramatic storm. Mm-hmm. And it's just the everyday or every week or every month deluges are just going to be more and more. What was it that the person in Providence was saying about this past summer?
Yeah, the director of emergency management said that this summer alone in Providence, they had about a dozen flooding events that caused they needed boat rescue in the city to evacuate people. Yeah, just this summer, and we didn't have a hurricane. So that, you think, oh, that was an intense rain. Well, people are already impacted. And then the threshold to get like federal relief for those types of flood events is much, much higher. You need like $3 million in damages. So these regular occurring kind of inconvenient flood events that still require like a boat rescue or loss of your belongings, there's no federal dollars coming to these areas to support those communities. And climate change has health impacts. Now, flooding leads to mold, has asthma impacts. Here, this is observed emergency room visits related to excess heat. So this is specific to Rhode Island. Over time, this is from 1950 till now. It's been increasing, and it's based on increasing temperatures. Now the next set of slides are from University of Rhode Island, has a citizen science effort called MyCoast, and citizens go out around Rhode Island when there are these rain events and photograph where the flooding is occurring, because based on that, scientists can improve their predictive models. And so this is one example. This isn't a major hurricane. This was December 23rd, 2022. It was high tide combined with strong winds, intense rain, and it created this flooding event, which it was the tide gauge here at Newport showed that it was 3.8 feet above mean high water. That's 3 feet higher than the normal high tide would have been. Like, you can predict exactly what the high tide will be on any given day. But when it's 3 feet higher than what it should be, and it's not even a hurricane, it shows you what's sea level rise is doing right now, as well as sometimes when you get these strong winds and kind of the combination of impacts can really drive flooding. Now, what you'll see is a prediction of what we will likely see around 2075 twice a day, because by then that accelerated sea level rise will mean that these events can occur right here in Newport. So this was Newport Harbor. Again, this is all from December 23rd, 2022, but this type of flooding will occur regularly in the future.
Ooh.
Submerged walkway on the Newport Harbor along Kerwin Lane, along Coddington Wharf, looking west towards the harbor, Wellington Ave and Roseneck, Gooseberry Beach parking lot, Clinton Street. This is a storm drain that's not able to eject out because the water is coming in from the harbor, so it's actually flowing the opposite way. So URI has an online tool. You can look up any address on storm tools, and it will show you this is a 100-year storm event with 2 feet of sea level rise. So we've already kind of experienced a foot, and this will be the future prediction with like a storm event. And you can see these 3 Newport churches will have, encroaching water, not flooded, but St. John's potentially could be flooded, like the wind direction changes. So we, wanted to bring this to your attention because either parishioners live in these areas or people getting to the church will be impacted. Newport will definitely be impacted by climate change. So I was working at the Newport Navy base when we partnered with University of Rhode Island. They have these great models that show you, they took like the 1938 hurricane and they added 5 feet of sea level rise. That is a lot, but that's still something that could be, we could experience around 2060. And you can see this is the water depth. So red is like 5 meters of water depth, and then it's more shallow flooding here, and the blue colors. Here's the casino, the Navy base is really impacted, as well as Thames Street, Rhode Island. So our kind of economic hub unfortunately for tourism, will be impacted in the future. This is the same prediction, but a 3D visual. So as you're coming over the Pell Bridge, you can see the Navy base, and the casino is that big parking lot area. So the whole Pell Bridge realignment project, hopefully considered future weather events in its kind of design and drainage. Rhode Island DOT has not always been great about using future predictive data. Through that project at the Navy base, we also helped calculate the time it would take to evacuate Aquidneck Island. This would be under clear skies, so not a hurricane, not flooding out a road where you couldn't get through, not during the summer when we have the added visitors here. And it would take 14 hours to evacuate all the residents. And there's only one shelter on the island in Middletown. So not everyone could do that. And we have to really kind of think about elderly or people who don't have a vehicle or don't have the means to do that, might be staying and would need more support than currently exists. Now this shows you the White House developed this climate and economic justice screening tool. This area in gray here, the north end of Newport, the western edge of Middletown, it's been identified as an overburdened and under-stressed community it's disadvantaged for these particular variables that you can see the housing costs are 96%, low income is 69%, asthma rates are higher, wastewater discharge is higher, education levels lower, and that puts these communities at a disadvantage when they're trying to bounce back from these events. So how can our churches be hubs of climate resilience in our community, helping our neighbors weather the physical and spiritual storms of climate change? Around the country, there are great examples of climate resilient hubs. These are community institutions, it could be a church, that helps educate residents about extreme weather events and the impacts of climate change, and it provides some of those relief services like phone charging stations or air conditioning during heat waves or warming centers during these cold snaps that we have been seeing. Extreme climate change doesn't just warm everything, it's extreme weather that we've experienced. So when we started this project, we definitely identified Newport, particularly that kind of north end community, and being an area that we want to ensure that we're supporting. That is, the emphasis on environmental racism, because these communities of color have disproportionately been at a greater risk. So there are some wonderful Newport nonprofits that some of our churches are already partnering with, and we wanted to kind of hear from all of you, all the 6 Episcopal churches, who they're already working with, so that we can kind of work through those partnerships to identify unmet community needs. Now, it already came to our attention through, Newport Fire, but as well as the state housing, that warming centers are an unmet community need right now. But through some of these other, and that might be feasible in partnership with the Quinnipiac Island Emergency Volunteer Alliance. I guess they have been identified as possibly staffing some of these warming centers. Or hearing from the other partners, like we've spoken with Siemens Church Institute about their changing capacity, as well as the needs and also the preparations that would be required to provide, to meet these unmet needs in a safe, sustainable, and effective way, because you don't want to just open the church doors and not be aware of what really needs to be done.
That's a practical question.
Yeah.
And that if we worked through the diocese and the national church to learn whether our safeguarding obligations would be in place for such a thing. In other words, would the, for example, Edward King Center volunteers have to be trained in Safe Church in order to serve as volunteers for a warming center in an Episcopal church?
No, it's a great
Nope, we haven't got to that point.
I mean, the bishop's aware of this request, and he has some concerns about staffing and safety.
Well, that's more of an overlay church regulatory concern, but each rector is going to hold that concern. How do I ensure compliance, because it's my responsibility to make sure everybody's safe in the church.
Honestly, like insurance requirements. So those are all things that we can dig into, because and Father Kevin at St. John's, his wife actually works
At Newport Mental Health.
Newport Mental Health. So they were asking very strategic questions.
So the good news, as I understand it, and this is very early days in this conversation, and so the question like that is really essential.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't thought about that yet.
Yeah.
But if I'm accurate, the state entity that's working on this, they have money.
Yeah.
They do.
They have money. And so if they're serious about using churches for this kind of thing. They'd be serious about requiring people that they're going to be paying to take safe church training.
Right.
It's
just not something that would be in place for example, a Methodist, Presbyterian, or Baptist church.
Well, they have their own thing, but yeah, exactly. So, but that's the sort of thing that would have to be sorted out.
Yeah.
Just to reinforce something that Emily just said, that in terms of coming up with a checklist or handbook for parish communities to be prepared for extreme weather events and ways in which they can respond pastorally. In our conversations, and more Emily's conversations with folks on the wider Episcopal Church level, they don't have anything like that yet. And so some of those folks then went to talk to their colleagues, Presbyterian Church, United Methodist, etc. They don't have it either. And so this work that we're doing on Quidnick Island is in fact cutting edge for the church across the country, and not just the Episcopal Church.
I'm sure churches have been using the warming centers, but making sure they're actually prepared. You're not bringing people into the flood zone at St. John's without thinking through, like, this is an example of the types of things we could have on the checklist that Norman referred to is, having sandbags on site or a sub pump or, looking at the wind load of the roof, having a generator, raising utilities, these kind of things make sure that you can keep your doors open. And some of these would cost more money than others, but maybe through this partnership with the state, they actually said they might pay for a generator if that's what it takes to create an additional warming center in Newport.
And the Diocese of Rhode Island also has funds for that sort of thing as well. If we're talking the four-figure kind of grant, so to speak, as opposed to a 5 or 6 figure grant, but there are resources out there. If a parish can identify some specific need, we can work with the chief financial officer of the diocese to help meet those needs.
Yeah.
Another thing, Emily mentioned it. This is the 6th time that we've sat down or stood, in Emily's case, with parish leaders in 6 out of the 7 Episcopal churches on the island. And one of the things that's become clear is that these sorts of questions and concerns are not new to you all. That many of the parishes are already working on one form or another of this because everybody knows that things are getting worse, and we need to be prepared. But we like to be able to learn from one another, and out of this year-long grant, and we haven't nailed this specifically as a goal, but I think it's become clear that coming up with some kind of draft handbook checklist for parishes would be a very good thing to come up with as a result of all of these conversations.
The third bullet is a 6-figure item.
Yeah. Well, especially if Trinity is building, a new facility, they're starting to think about it. Each church has its different, this is more urban and, you have the elevation, but other Emmanuel's dealing with the floodplain of their campus. So each one has its own challenges as well as resources in terms of connections or space or air conditioning or not air conditioning.
So, Jared, I'm going to put you on the spot for a moment. I don't think, you haven't met Jerry before. Jerry was several years at Yale Divinity School with that kind of, stratospheric level view of the Episcopal Church and the Episcopal Church as a whole, as well as the Yale view of how to deal with all of these things. Do you have any thoughts about this conversation and how your experience might relate to what we're doing?
Well, first of all, Yale, especially having on its campus the School of Environmental Studies,
Right.
is, comparatively speaking, pioneer in this field.
Yeah, especially science communication.
Pardon?
Especially science communication,
Right.
the best in the world.
Right. So the university itself is as all over this as universities tend to get, from a research standpoint, from a resource use and policy standpoint. The Divinity School is certainly a key part of that overall awareness and set of strategic policies. YDS is currently breaking ground on its new residential community, which has been part of its strategic plan for the past 7 or 8 years. It will be the first and largest net zero residential community for seminary in the world. So it's the signature accomplishment of the current dean, Rick Sterling.
And substantial leadership by my beloved law partner, Chris
Chris
Sawyer,
Sawyer,
who
exactly.
pioneered it for years.
So there are lots of initiatives going on at Yale and through YDS in particular. The staff retreat that we had August of 22, of course I just retired, so I didn't go to the staff retreat in 23. A signature piece of the kind of strategic look forward was, how does YDS look fully into the future in terms of its environmental responsibility? How does that play into every curriculum on campus, et cetera? So this has kind of joined social justice as a Siamese twin of their thinking about what they're preparing clergy for in terms of future ministry. How deep is its take? I can't tell you. Just as we host an event like this and a small number of people show up, the same kind of thing would happen even at the Divinity School. You host an event like this and only a certain percentage shows up. So the grassroots buy-in is one of the eternal questions. Not just what does the policy say, what does leadership say, or where does the resources being put, but what's happening with all the people involved, who are students, faculty, staff members, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say it's certainly higher than most. I would maybe call it a leader. There's a lot more that should be done. Does that answer your question?
Oh, well, yes, thank you. And
was it part of my curriculum in terms of training educational leaders in ministry in schools and colleges? Absolutely.
that's great. So one of the things that I find both challenging and daunting, but also exhilarating, is this work of bringing the conversation about what it means to be a church and what does it mean to worship, together with, for lack of a better word, science. We're learning so much, we're experiencing so much, but how often do we as Christians, specifically as Episcopalians here on Quincy Island right now, make the connection between our faith in God, our sense of call, and taking care of the earth?
And to that point, two real champions of that intersection and how the Academy approaches that intersection are two very, very recently retired senior lecturers at both the School of the Environment and the Divinity School, Tucker and John Grimm. I would say that they are kind of leading voices in the whole notion of environmental and religious.
I've had the opportunity to hear them and meet them. They are world-class and world-traveling spokespeople for this whole work. And I have to say that when I emailed Marianne a few times, and she actually responded to my email, which for somebody, which means that she's really, really, serious about, that grassroots kind of thing.
And one of my students, Sam King, who graduated 2 years ago, is there now, 30-something boots on the ground curriculum advocate. So he's traveling around to colleges and schools promoting the educational arm of all this.
Well, and we have, you've probably met Kaylee Kassenheiser. She is a student at YDS, getting a joint degree with the School for the Environment, and she's doing an internship at St. Martin's, Providence right now. She's a member of our Creation Care team, and she's in the process towards ordination in the Diocese of Rhode and so it kind of all comes together in Kaylee in a certain sense.
Yeah.
So I just want to say something about the pilgrimages that Emily referred to. Saturday, November 18th, 2 weeks from yesterday, glad to say Brian is going to be joining us. We're taking a small bus and we're going to be going all around the coast of the island. Pam Rubinoff, who is an expert at all of this of many years at the Coastal Resource Center at URI, is going to be talking about sea level rise and storm events and how all these places on the island are impacted by that. But it's going to be in the context of prayer, singing, and reflection. And so that's what I'm calling it a pilgrimage. It's a form of what I've dubbed, it's not original with me, but the term of wild worship, where we engage with what we know about the wider world around us, but doing it in the context of worship. And so we still have a couple openings.
We are hosting the Episcopal Church Women here at Emmanuel on that day, and I'm the speaker. Unfortunately, simultaneously.
As one of my priest friends once said, she hadn't gotten a bilocational thing down.
Yeah.
But if you know somebody else from Emmanuel who might be interested in that, we're going to leave at 10, come back about 3 from Brenton Point. And again, we're going to do something similar around the watersheds of the island in the spring, when you can maybe see some of the water in the watersheds, other than the reservoirs from where we get our drinking water, having made it through the parking lot of Stop and Shop and Shaw's before reaching our faucets. I know we're getting close to our next service.
I need to yield the signal.
But thank you for joining us today. And in the few minutes we have left, yes?
You don't have the handbook on that.